Okay. Good afternoon and welcome. As we begin this meeting of the Seattle Planning Commission, we respectfully acknowledge that our meeting today is taking place on occupied Coast Salish land. We pay respect to Coast Salish elders, past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous people. To acknowledge this land is to recognize the history of physical and cultural genocide and settler colonialism, which continues to displace Indigenous people today. It is to also recognize these lands, waters, and their significance for the resilient and wise people who continue to thrive in this region, despite the consequences of displacement and broken treaties. Those who hold settler privilege in this city must work towards supporting the Coast Salish people and all Indigenous people using various forms of wealth and privilege they reap due to it. My name is Yoa Alvarez. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Seattle Planning Commission. We have a couple of announcements to both our members, or to members of the public and to visitors. First of all, welcome. We're happy to make all commission meetings open to the public, but we do ask that we please note that the Planning Commission does not hold public hearings. The commission is an advisory body. We provide recommendations to elected leaders that in turn make the actual decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to elected officials. This meeting is a hybrid meeting with some individuals participating remotely while others are participating in the boards and commissions room at Seattle City Hall. As part of our meeting start, we'd like to look at our color brave space norms, and I'd like to invite a commissioner to choose and briefly speak to one of them that they feel has particular relevance to today's agenda. I've been trained to wait. What I can call it. Caleb left. He wanted to do it.
This is sorry. This is Cecilia. Yeah. I can do one. I'm gonna name practice examining racially biased systems. I know that we've talked about this, I think, the last couple of meetings, but systems are what are left after all the people in this room leave, which feels very connected to everything that we do.
Thanks, Cecilia. Agreed. If there are no amendments or modifications, I suggest we all agree to these norms. Cool. We'll start off with a round of introductions. I can go first. Yoa Alvarez, pronouns are she, they. I live in White Center Highland Park, and my day job is as a designer at an architecture in Seattle. I think maybe we'll just go through the folks in the room first and then pass it to online, but I'll pass it to Nick.
Great. Hi, everyone. Nick Whipple. I use he, him, and he pronoun, sorry. I live in West Seattle in the North Del Ridge neighborhood, and for my day job, I'm a planner over on the east side. Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Brandon, she, her pronouns. I live in the Crown Hill, Whittier Heights area. And my day job is as a senior project manager of transit-oriented development at Sound Transit. That's Julia.
Okay, so we're just doing introductions.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Janet Shields. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Ballard, and I do community planning and engagement for King County and Puget Sound Regional Council. I'll pass it to Kayla.
Hi, Michaela Daffrin, she, her pronouns, and I live in Capitol Hill and I work in affordable housing policy and planning. And I will pass it to Cecilia.
Hi, my name is Cecilia Black. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in Capitol Hill and work in disability advocacy on housing and transportation issues. And I will pass it to Matt Hutchins.
My name is Matt Hutchins. I use he, him pronouns. I am an architect and I live in West Seattle. Let's see, I will pass it to, I see Dylan. Dylan looks like he's not in the room.
Two Dylans are on the call.
Oh, Dylan G. I see Dylan G. Sorry.
Hi, Dylan Glasecki. You see he, him pronouns. I live in the Central District, an architect and urban designer at Perkins Eastman. Pass it to Radhika.
Hi everyone, I'm Radhika Nair. I use she, her pronouns. I live in North Seattle in Wedgwood. And in my day job, I'm a community planner at Savor Workshop. And I'll pass it to Dylan S.
Dylan Stevenson here. I use he, they pronouns. I live in the International District and I teach in the Department of Urban Design and Planning at the University of Washington. And I will pass it along to Shio.
Caleb?
Hi everyone, Caleb Tolde, he, him pronouns. I live in Beacon Hill and I'm an educator. I'll pass it to Deanna.
Good afternoon, I'm Diana Quintanar. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and for my day job, I am a multimodal transportation planner. Not sure if we're done with commissioners.
We're done with commissioners. Let's bounce it to Robin. Let's bounce to Olivia.
Sorry, I was muted. It was taking me a while to get unmuted. Robin McGonigal, I live on Vashon Island. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a member of the staff.
Hi everyone, Olivia Baker. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm also staff to the Planning Commission. John?
Good afternoon, I'm John Hoy. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm staff to the Planning Commission.
I'll wrap us up. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us in person and online. My name is Vanessa Murdoch. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of the Planning Commission. And with that, I will turn it back to Zio for some further comments, and we will then get to public comment. And I do see there's a member of the public with their hand up. So when we get to that part of the agenda, I'd be happy to call on them. Thanks, Vanessa.
So we have 3 items on our agenda today. First is a briefing from Seattle Department of Transportation staff on the Low Pollution Neighborhoods Program. Second is an update from the Office of Planning and Community Development on the outside citywide public space explorer, and we'll conclude with commission business. Before we do that, we need to approve our August 28, 2025 minutes. I'll ask for a motion to approve those minutes.
So move, Michaela.
Michaela, second.
Nick second.
Great. Are there any changes or amendments to the last full commission meetings minutes? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Sorry. It's really hard in a hybrid meeting, you guys. It's all opposed and any abstentions. Great. Thanks, everybody. And then just to outline our next set of commission meetings, next Thursday's Land Use and Transportation Committee will be held from 7:30 to 9 a.m. online via the Teams platform. And our next full commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday, September 25th from 7:30 to 9:30 to 9 in the morning. This will be a hybrid meeting with some individuals participating remotely while others participate in person in the boards and commissions room at City Hall. To Vanessa for announcements.
Thank you, Zio. As Zio mentioned, this is a hybrid meeting and truly a hybrid meeting where we have about half of the commissioners here in the room, joined by staff from SDOT. Thank you for joining us. And the remainder of our commissioners joining us on Teams. So please bear with us as we try to facilitate this hybrid meeting. I'd like to remind commissioners to use the chat function of MS Teams to be recognized to join the discussion queue and not to put any substantive information in the chat, as members of the public who are calling in don't have access to the chat. So we want to make sure anything of substance that we say is said out loud so members of the public can hear us. We have a couple of different options on how to provide public comment. That can be done, which we welcome. That can be done by joining us here in the Boards and Commissions room in Seattle City Hall. That can also be done by emailing me in advance of the meeting and I will read it out. Or it can, if you're joining us on MS Teams, you can raise your hand. And I do see we have a member of the public who has raised their hand. So after Zio hums a few bars, I should say, about our public comment, I will call on that person. I'm not seeing anybody who is actually phoning into the meeting, but should one pop up on the screen, I will recognize that person. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Zio to talk about our public comment, and then I will call on the individual who has their hand up.
Yeah, so just a few general things. Once again, the commission provides time for public comment at all meetings, but we do not hold public hearings or an advisory body. We make recommendations to elected leaders who in turn make the actual decisions, and individuals who make comments to the commission to remember that the mayor and city council make the decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to elected officials. And at this point, I invite the individuals in the audience to offer public comment. Please keep your comments to 2 minutes. I believe we have one member of the public who would like to give a comment.
We do, and I'm just figuring out. So.
They'll have to unmute themselves. I don't know if you want to call on.
Oh. Peter, would you like to unmute yourself and give comment?
Looks like their permissions keep getting bounced around.
Okay.
There you go. Now we can hear you.
Here?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I've been searching. I'm concerned with my neighborhood for as far as density. I'm trying to make sure that I'm at the right meeting. Anyways, when Bruce Harold had whatever staff figure out the maps, there was kind of an addendum to Upper Fremont, which I cannot find anymore. So I don't know if it's been eliminated or if it's still in process. But bottom line, I'm basically at 46 and Finney, which turns out to be a major bus junction between the 44 line and the 5. And it has been confusing to me for the last 30 years why there hasn't been more density around this transportation hub. So I'm trying to figure out anywhere, online, maps, what committee or or what public hearing I can go to make my voice heard that this place needs to be densified.
Thank you so much, Peter. I will let you know that the Seattle City Council Select Committee on the proposed amendments to the comp plan and the associated legislation to implement House Bill 1110. They're holding a public hearing tomorrow.
Yes.
That there is the online version in the morning and then the in-person in the afternoon. So that would be a great place if you either want to turn up in person in the afternoon or provide comment in the morning. And as the meeting rolls on, I will try to look up where online you can find the particular amendments. I would start with a internet search of Seattle City Council Comprehensive Plan Select Committee. And somewhere on that website, you should be able to review the various amendments that have been proposed. And thank you very much for coming to our meeting.
Sure. Do you have the online time and the physical meeting time?
Registration begins for the online, I believe, at 8 o'clock in the morning.
You said 8:30.
8:30, sorry. But
Okay.
the actual, it starts at 9:30, but you can sign up at 8:30. And then the afternoon begins.
Maybe you should just put it in the chat after this.
I will put it in the chat, which you will be able to see, and we don't have anybody calling in. So I will put that information in the chat. So please hang on for a few minutes and we'll get you that information.
It's there.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I think that concludes our public comment.
It
Unless,
does.
okay. So we'll move on to our first agenda item, which is an update on the low pollution neighborhoods. Radcliffe Daconet and from the Seattle Department of Transportation and his colleagues. That's what's in the notes, sorry.
Okay.
Are going to update us on the department's low pollution neighborhoods program. Just as a reminder to commission members, we were first briefed on this work in May of last year. We have 45 minutes for this agenda item, and then welcome to Daconet.
Great, thanks, Zio. Thanks for having us here again. We were here last May to sort of really talk about low pollution neighborhoods. We've had some time now to, I guess, get our funding lined up, obligate the funding, the federal RAISE grant that we had. It took quite some time to make that happen. And it was really just happened in January of this year. So we've been really moving fast to try to get a consultant on board. But yes, this has been a long time coming. So really happy to be here to give you all an update on that. And I have here Jaya Ezaguirre joining us also to talk about low pollution neighborhoods. So if we'll go on to the next slide, please. All right, this is our definition of how we're talking about low pollution neighborhoods. It's a designated area or streets where we can deploy or pilot a variety of policy, program, built interventions or incentives to reduce pollution and increase climate resilience. What does that really mean? Well, it's just an opportunity, the word pollution there is very intentional. A lot of the conversation before this was about just emission zones. How do we keep cars out of a particular area? Well, certainly cars are a big piece of it, but we're also talking about buildings. So in working with the Office of Sustainability and Environment, we're looking to reduce pollution from the building side, but also the transportation side. And then we're beginning to expand it to our other partners across the city to participate in this work. So just making sure that this language sort of is an umbrella for a lot of different things that we can do within a low pollution neighborhoods. But it did start out from a transportation perspective, then we added the buildings, and we may add more. And really, it's just about imagining our neighborhoods to have cleaner air and make sure that we can breathe a lot easier in these places. And then it's not just actual bits and pieces, but it's going to be policies, programs, construction projects, and things that we can try out and then hopefully build on that and do more low pollution neighborhoods. All right, next slide. Just a little bit more context on how this all came to be. We had commitments from C40. This is a climate organization that at the time interim Mayor Burgess signed onto, Green and Healthy Streets. A few years later in 2022, we had the first executive order that first talked about low pollution neighborhoods. And then we, in 2023, we released the climate change response framework and really focused on the language of low pollution neighborhoods, how we connect, and really, and working with the comp plan folks as well. The idea of 15-minute cities, of course, was really big. And then we had this opportunity to pursue this Rebuilding American Infrastructure and Equity grant, so a RAISE grant. We received that grant. And we were really excited about it, $1.2 million, but it did take quite some time to obligate that funding. Luckily, we also had the 2024 transportation levy passed last November, and in it, in that yellow box there, $8 million earmarked for low pollution neighborhoods. Next slide. And then just to recap over the executive orders in 2022, the idea was said, convene a community conversation. We've done some of that. Develop an implementation and funding plan. That's what we're working on now with the consultants that we have on board. We're working on a scope of work with them, and Jai will talk a little bit more about that momentarily. And then by 2028, have at least 3 low pollution neighborhoods in place. In 2025, just revisiting all of this is really continue the work that we're doing. This new part here is expanding our partnerships. First, it was just Office of Sustainability and Environment and SDOT working on low pollution neighborhoods, but certainly there's cross-pollination with the Office of Planning and Community Development, with the comp plan and all of the work that they're doing on land use, with the Office of Economic Development on green jobs, Seattle City Light. We're working with them on delivering more EV opportunities and how we just use our energy much more efficiently. And then Seattle Public Utilities talking about pollution is more than just the air. What about water pollution? So making sure that we're not spoiling our waterways as well. I mean, there's a conversation of, okay, there are tailpipes emission from cars, but what about tire dust? So those are things that we're beginning to explore and think about with our partners at SPU. And then parks, certainly an opportunity to weave in or uplift the opportunities that we have with parks in any of the selected or low pollution neighborhoods to be determined. And then, of course, the mayor's office wanting to have a little bit more coordination across all of these partners and really continue to talk about and uplift the work that we do around the sort of low pollution neighborhood umbrella. The $8 million that we have from the levy, it may seem like a lot. In the grand scheme of things, probably not so much, but how can we leverage that, build off of that work, and then find other ways to really get to the version, I think, of what people are imagining low pollution neighborhoods to be. But I think there's going to be tiers of how we spend this money and what we get to in the version, I would say 1.0 by 2028. And then this last point here, where we're focusing our initial planning efforts in communities that have experienced disproportionate damage from pollution, extreme weather events, and high concentrations of collisions, and thinking about Vision Zero, where there are crashes and deaths, and then areas with high transit dependence. So that's a lot of data to look at and say, okay, here are some of the areas that might fit that. Now, we've done some initial work on that. Jai will talk about that a little bit more. But then, trying to keep it simple, but also diving into the data to make sure we're taking a look at the right spots. All right, before I hand it off to Jai, I want to talk about how the multiple parts of low pollution neighborhoods has grown. Here we have, on the left-hand side, we have SDOT mobility and trees and OSC there in orange. Really, that was really combining in the executive order conversations about decarbonizing buildings and reducing emissions. But there was also part of that executive order about trees. We need to expand our tree canopy. So those are things that we had purview over at SDOT and OSC. But then we were asked to also partner, as it were, just bring more people into the tent and how we can deliver across the board on low pollution neighborhoods. So we're including SPU, Seattle City Light, OPCD, OED, and then of course the community. A lot of this is going to depend on how communities want to see their neighborhoods evolve under this idea of low pollution neighborhoods. Maybe they may even call it something else, but we'll start with low pollution neighborhoods, work with communities to figure out what it is that they want. For example, we've already had some conversations with the Duwamish Valley Sustainability Association and the Duwamish River Community Coalition. Yes. So all of the folks, who are really interested in this work. So there's been some sort of pre-work before we go out with the consultants. So building off of those community conversations. And then I'll pass to Jai here to talk a little bit more in detail of what we're going to do and what's coming up in the next few months.
Thank you, Red. So our approach to low pollution neighborhoods is really about creating a toolkit and service delivery model that meets communities where they are and builds on what people have already loved about their neighborhoods. The goal is straightforward. We want to improve air quality, climate resilience, mobility, safety, and community health. And we're keeping our focus pretty sharp, prioritizing safety as a public health issue through Vision Zero, while also ensuring that our climate response delivers real equity outcomes. You can go to the next slide. So these are some examples of some of the work that SDOT is already doing that sets the stage for LPNs. We've really been rethinking our right-of-way with healthy streets, more people-centered spaces. We've also been adding EV charging in the right-of-way and expanding our street canopy. The challenge now is not just about doing more, but really coordinating these ingredients in a way that delivers safer, more equitable, and climate-positive neighborhoods. LPN gives us a chance to do this, all while making walking, biking, and transit the easiest way to get around. And by thoughtfully managing vehicle access, I think we can really deliver a strong first version of LPNs within the next, by 2028. Moving on to the next slide, I want to talk about how our RAISE grant, the 1.2 million plus the 300,000 local match, gives us the tools to really do this work well. First, we're planning on starting with neighborhood assessments to help us understand community needs in the 3 potential pilot areas. From there, we want to develop an implementation toolkit to match the right low pollution neighborhood strategies to each neighborhood, understanding that different neighborhoods are going to have different priorities. We also want to build an implementation and funding plan with cost estimates and clear next steps to help us move more seamlessly from the planning to the action phase. And just as importantly, we want to really invest in community engagement and storytelling to help co-create with communities, lift up neighborhood-specific stories, and build something from the ground up. Finally, we are working with the Urban Freight Lab to develop freight emissions framework so cleaner, safer streets can work hand in hand with the realities of a neighborhood economic vitality, delivery needs, making sure that safe streets also means thriving businesses and thriving communities. So moving on to the next slide, the question is, where should we focus? Our first pilots need to be where LPNs make the biggest impact. We have limited funds, limited time, and that means focusing on neighborhoods with vulnerable communities guided by the Racial and Social Equity Index. These are places that are hit hardest by pollution and climate events. So we are also prioritizing areas with high crash rates and neighborhoods with high transit dependence, low car ownership, because those are the places where better walking, biking, and transit infrastructure will probably have the strongest impact. Using this approach, we've identified about 6 potential candidate areas already experiencing extreme heat, poor air quality, and flooding. This isn't random. Early conversations with the Transportation Equity Working Group reminded us to keep it simple and follow the data. Of course, analysis can go on forever, but since we need to start somewhere, this really helped us narrow our focus. We worked with SDOTs and OSC experts to layer data on air quality, heat, stormwater to see where those impacts overlap. And on the map, you can see some of these areas. The red circles, green circles highlight overburdened communities impacted by air pollution, and the stars show where ecology's monitoring sites already are. Altogether, I think this gives us a clear data-driven, equity-focused foundation for selecting our pilot neighborhoods to move this work forward and hopefully in future years expand to additional neighborhoods as well.
And we'll just begin wrapping up about our progress. As I said, we've had some community conversations in late 2023, early 2024. We've met with boards, commissions, had some initial conversations with community members and stakeholders through our C40 engagement. They did some surveying for us as well with businesses. Our core group, again, started with OSE and SDOT, and lots of the different divisions within SDOT. We've been meeting regularly for some time now, but are beginning to expand that out to the other partner departments. For example, we'll even have a conversation next week with Office of Housing. They're interested in learning more about how low pollution neighborhoods could be implemented in some of the work that they're doing as well. And we've hired Jaya just this past summer. So she's ramping up on all this work, and she'll be leading our RAISE grant and be the PM for that. We've selected our consultants. We're in the process of scoping out the work and trying to be as nimble as possible against some of the new federal limitations to the funding that's coming through. So yes, we do have 1.2 million, and in some cases we don't have that 1.2 million, trying to figure out a way to continue this work with sort of the core work that we need to do if we should have fewer funds to get that work done. And we'll begin our deeper dive conversations with the community very soon, as soon as the consultants kick off that work soon after that. So we've got here Q3 2025. So we're looking forward to that and beginning those conversations. And as I said earlier, some of those conversations are already happening as they're reaching out to us, and sort of informal conversations before we really dive in with the consultants. And then for our first set of deliverables, we're expecting in Q1 or Q2 of 2026. And it'll help us begin to take a look at where the 3 low pollution neighborhoods will focus on, and then sort of setting the stage for how we begin to fund some of that work. And then at the end of 2026, have some maybe 0 to 5% concepts for what some of those low pollution neighborhood interventions might look like. Right. That concludes our presentation, and we have time for questions and conversation about low pollution neighborhoods. You're very welcome.
There is no names in the chat that are going to queue right now. Oh, Rebecca.
Thanks. Yeah, that was really interesting to hear about. You mentioned possible interest from the Office of Housing. I wonder if you could just speak a little bit more to what they have in mind, and if there's a possibility in the future, pending the success of these pilot programs, to kind of think about pairing it with housing levy funds and, or subsidized land, or some ways to combine these various outcomes in these various neighborhoods.
Right. As you recall, this started out as an idea from the Office of Sustainability and Environment and SDOT together to address the transportation piece and the building side. And throughout that time that we were having these conversations and then doing the comp plan, other departments were like, we also want to reduce pollution. And so, we've just been growing the tent, as it were, for folks wanting to partner with us, with other departments wanting to reduce pollution. Office of Housing certainly has a lot of overlap with wanting to reduce pollution in the work that they do, and have much more energy efficiency in their buildings. And then the concepts of 15-minute neighborhoods, all of that overlaps with, I think, the low pollution neighborhood concept. So I think part of this is just making sure that all the different departments at the city are aligned in how we move forward with this. Some of the things that Office of Housing are thinking of are not necessarily, traffic management, and maybe these are the things that we can help them with. And I think perhaps, we bring them into the fold as well if this is something that they would like to work on as part of the three that we select. And then, as you had mentioned, maybe beyond the three, if it's not something that Office of Housing can do within the three that we select, there are opportunities in the future to include low pollution neighborhood concepts in other projects and from other departments.
Deanna and then Michaela.
Hi, Ratcliffe. Thank you so much. It's very, very exciting to see this work moving forward, and congratulations on all the extensive efforts to get the funding and getting this work started. It's very exciting. Thanks again for very clear presentation. I just wanted to perhaps ask, I didn't necessarily see anything with regards to incorporating in this phase of the work, kind of like preliminary planning around the monitoring framework that you all may consider using for kind of post-implementation tracking. And the reason for thinking about this right now is sometimes it's very helpful to think about the metrics and potential outcomes and these objectives, how they get tracked, how will they be measured, to kind of have an early definition of success and what it would mean, for a particular timeline. I think these kinds of projects also require, or it's helpful to identify kind of the time frame of where we would see these communities benefit from emissions reductions or pollution reductions. So I was just curious if you could speak to that. And then also just in general, I understand that through all these community conversations and CBO conversations and engagement you've been having, it's part of what's informing perhaps the vision and goals and objectives of these low pollution neighborhoods. But is there a specific moment in the process of this where those will be very clearly established to each neighborhood that is going to be used as a pilot?
Yes, thanks for that question, Deanna. And I'll try to answer in this broad way. I think one of the things we really tried to do is not put out what a low pollution neighborhood looks like, because oftentimes when we talk about this, the examples we get are European. And when we first started talking about this, a lot of folks were like, well, our neighborhoods aren't like that, and we're not going to achieve that level. There are some neighborhoods that could meet some of those European ideal ways, and for those neighborhoods, great. And those are some measures that we might use. So for example, we've worked with the Capitol Hill Eco District. And maybe in some locations, a more European style closing the streets could work. That's a measure that works well for that particular area. But say in different parts of the city, in other neighborhoods, that might not apply. So I think we wanted to hold off in setting what these measures and metrics are until we had the conversation with the communities and figured out what is the highest priority for those neighborhoods. In some cases, in some early conversations, it's how about just some lighting to make it safe to get to our bus stops and connecting to our parks. Might work in one part of the city, but not necessarily in another part. I think as we have these conversations with different communities and then begin to sort of put all of the ideas together in one bowl, I think some of the measures and metrics that apply to all of them will be able to tease out. And then in that first set of deliverables in 2026, we'll be able to share what those common goals are, and then also be hopefully be able to share what are some of the ideal outcomes for each of the selected low pollution neighborhoods.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michaela?
You might have said this, so my apologies, but how will you go from the 6 to the 3? How will you select those communities?
That'll be part of the conversations when the consultant comes on board. We did our initial pass with some of that data. We talked to our transportation equity work group that said, you don't need to dive into all of that detail. There's already good data that's out there that speaks to areas that have pollution. There's work that the state is doing. And they've got some initiatives. So there was on the map, there was just this area, and it's South Seattle, the Duwamish area. Let's take a look at that. And I think we'll do another pass at that, maybe take a look at some other data inputs, and then begin to whittle down which of those 6 initially become then the 3. And who knows, depending on the funding that we have or how we leverage these levy funds, the $8 million, maybe it could be more than 3, but we're focusing right now to deliver 3 by 2028.
I would just encourage prioritization of communities where you're welcomed and where, folks are interested in.
Oh, absolutely.
About having SDOT there. A lot of the pilot programs can be more durable if you have local stewards
Right.
and folks who have a shared vision with the city on that. Right. So don't just rely on the data, but rely on the relationships as well.
Yeah, I think the relationships are going to be key, and that one part of community conversations. If communities don't want this, then we're not going to be going into that community. But communities that really want to do this and create their version of this, that is our intention, to co-create with the community and have them essentially be the designers of their own space that fits within this low pollution neighborhood umbrella.
Julia? You'll ask my question.
Okay. Second. My question was directly related to what you were just sharing around the community conversations for this next quarter, I think. And I'm just curious around what the approach to those conversations are and how you're having them, how you're entering those community spaces. So kind of building on what Michaela said. And if you can share who the consultant is and, kind of what led you to them based on their approach.
The first question is a lot of the community conversation. The communities have actually been reaching out to us. So, for example, the Duwamish Valley Sustainability Association, as part of the comp plan and work that they've been doing, have asked us to participate in some of the planning work that they've been doing already. So I've attended some of their meetings, and some of those meetings were in Spanish, and it was like, whoa, here's how we learn now as only English speakers, sort of the challenge of understanding the planning that's happening when it's only in English. So that was an interesting way to hear about their way of seeing their community, and also talking about their community in a much more free way, I guess, because of the language barrier. So when the planning session is being done in Spanish, how much more free for that community it is to share their ideas. So maybe we do something like that as part of low pollution neighborhoods and build off of that work. I don't think we want to start completely from scratch with communities. We've had conversations with Lake City on work that they've done, of course, Capitol Hill, Beacon Hill as well. All of these things we're building off engagement that's happened in the past. Through the comp plan, we don't want to go back and ask something new. We want to build off of what we've heard in these communities already through the different planning processes, from the comp plan, from the STP, et cetera. But really with a focus on co-creating with that community on what the outcomes are that they'd like to see. We haven't yet released who the consultant is, but I guess it would be fair to release it now. We're working with them. Maybe I get in trouble for saying it, but it's yeah, maybe I'll hold off. I should double check before I put my foot in my mouth here. But they're local. I will just say in our selection, they're a local firm, and many of the sub-consultants are local as well. It was a very competitive process. We had some international applications that, I would say heavy hitters in this kind of work, but we really did want to focus on the local knowledge, local connections to the community, and really have that deep understanding of local issues. And I think that's what set this consultant and their team above some of the other internationally renowned consultants.
I had a question just on kind of the coordination piece.
Sure.
You noted the different departments that are involved, the mayor's office involved, OSC, OPCD. I imagine you're probably, once you get into the communities too, there's likely maybe some schools that get involved or some other agencies that are going to need to be on board. So I'm curious, I guess, just maybe from a governance structure or leadership kind of approach on this, or how are you making sure that, there's accountability, that people have committed the resources needed to really make this a successful pilot and to demonstrate, that there's going to be progress and commitment buy-in on this, especially as you continue to add more people.
Yeah, appreciate that question, Nick. And I think that's why it was in the EO, and more and more people, and as we were working with lots of different departments on the comp plan as well, it's really all of the city departments working together to deliver improvements in the city. And so as the climate change response framework came out, the executive orders for low pollution neighborhoods, and working on the comp plan with lots of different departments, a lot of other folks were saying, hey, we'd like to also participate. For example, SPU said, as I'd mentioned earlier, it's not just about tailpipe emissions or decarbonization. What about water quality? And then thinking of the jobs element, the economic vitality of a community. That is, I think, just as important. We're working on that right now, making sure that all of the directors of these departments are aware of their staff's contributions. Some informal collaborations already as part of the work that we're already doing around EV delivery, et cetera. But I'm going through a process right now, formalizing that with all of the directors in each of these departments, and then the mayor's office will sort of solidify that as, again, they're also a partner in this and making sure that, as you said, all of these different departments have accountability in contributing to the low pollution neighborhood concept.
That runs out our queue. Pause to see if anybody else has any questions for the SDOT team. Yeah, we can keep going.
Maybe just because you're the Pike Street pilot, as a bit of a demonstration. How do you see that, I guess, as potential precedent or commitment?
Right. Thanks for that question. Yes. I think that the phrase test and learn has been a big thing for the Pike Place Market pilot. And I think that's what we're going to do as well, is something that we've been learning, and I think we can carry into working with the selected low pollution neighborhoods. Let's try out these ideas, the ideas that will work for that community. And I think there's been a lot of positive response to the Pike Place experience right now when we closed the street to personal vehicles, but the businesses requested that the delivery vehicles need to have access. So yes, let's make that work for businesses as well. Emergency vehicles, ADA, folks with handicap placards, and then legacy shoppers who are really coming there frequently. So there are a lot of stakeholders that we need to customize for, at the market, and we'll probably do the same for low pollution neighborhoods as well. And I think the part that, especially around businesses, is really important in making sure their needs are met. So this is why we have Urban Freight Lab with us as well as part of this process to think through what it means to get deliveries done in a way that is also reducing pollution. There are lots of different options. So there was the conversation recently of e-cargo bike delivery that was just at council, and that will go again for a vote next week. So really a lot of overlapping efforts that can contribute to low pollution neighborhoods. And then of course, all the things that we're doing right now at Pike Place and what we learned from that, how that could be applied to the LPNs as well. We'll certainly do so. Good and bad.
Deanna?
Hi, yes, only if there's time for another brief consideration. I think it would be perhaps interesting or helpful to think when screening for the 6 potential pilot neighborhoods being considered, to identify whether these 6 are trip attractors or emitters, meaning like, what is the balance of, if it's an area, and to your point, Radcliffe, right? Like if you were to be planning the toolkit and the bundle of strategies for a Capitol Hill neighborhood versus, a South Seattle neighborhood, that might look very different. And so I think understanding the criteria and types of solutions that could apply to either type of neighborhood would be a good framework to consider. Just because, the amount of, if it's a dense business district versus if it's just a residential neighborhood, that kinds of solutions will be completely different, and the kinds of potential effects and outcomes will also be informed by that. And so, although some of these neighborhoods might be considered by communities that are overburdened, there could be an opportunity to also identify, one of these pilots to envision the solution for those areas within the city that will require low pollution neighborhood strategies to reduce the impact of tailpipe emissions and, car dependence and all those kinds of goals as well. So just wanted to offer that, which I'm sure you all have probably considered, but I wanted to offer that idea.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Matt?
Yeah, cars are the #1 source of pollution. Every time we pull cars out of the public realm, like at Pike Place, or the image in this slide, I think that's Pike too, right? It's incredibly successful, and yet we do not, like, each one of these projects is like pulling teeth. We're 3 years into a process that is going to span another 3 years before we see the implementation of some of these things. And I would say that as part of your data gathering, I would hope that we would just be pushing forward with these as experimental implementations all throughout the city. Like, rather than gathering data, let's just let's do some of these things, rather than, like, I'm just really impatient. We're supposed to be like cutting our, the what is the climate framework, cutting our internal combustion engine traffic by 30%, and we're nowhere near that. And I think that I really want to see these things move faster. The thing that hearing your the presentation, the thing that didn't stand out, there was a lot of talk about community process and trees, but what wasn't there was how are we going to eliminate cars? That was, and that's the #1 pollution source. I feel like kind of soft selling the core benefit of the low pollution neighborhoods is a reduction of internal combustion engines. And so I'm looking for more bold action. I'm looking for it sooner. I'm looking for the pilots to be deployed, not just talked about. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Matt.
It's gonna be our last. Okay.
I think Matt should be the final word, but he sort of said some of what I was gonna say, both in terms of speed. We're facing a climate crisis.
Right.
We have decades of community planning work that has happened across the city that could be built upon and acted upon pretty quickly. I am an alumni of the Capitol Eco District, and I was part of the Pike Eagle Street pilot that shut down Pike Street during 4 summer nights one summer. And these efforts are going to be challenging, and people are not going to like them. And my experience has been that the city folds when there's pressure, particularly from those who are more powerful in the neighborhoods, to say, this is not working for me, without factoring in who it was working really well for. And so I'm just nervous again that you're going to get out there and experiment with something, and you're going to frame it as a learning, but it's really going to be because one powerful voice didn't like something, and the mayor made a phone call, and the mayor made it stop. And so I would just encourage you to set really clear objectives around what success is before you start, and what type of outcomes you are prioritizing, so that when it push comes to shove, you can use those to say, objectively, is this pilot successful, and is it worth continuing? Because again, that was a negative experience that I had working with SDOT on a program that showed a lot of promise, but got shut down because the business community didn't like it. So good luck.
Thank you. I will just say, I think that is one of the challenges that we recognize. Anytime we do something new like this or different from the status quo, there is definitely a lot of pushback from the other side. One of the reasons why we've sort of taken this approach, it's about relationship building and getting the community to also build that support for this. And it's not coming down from the top saying, you will have this foist upon you. It is working with the community, building that this is what the community wants. And certainly there will be some folks in the community who say, oh, we don't want this. But I think it's easier to dislodge these kinds of campaigns and these efforts when it comes from the top and it's not coming from the community. So as we build these relationships with community, and it's the leaders in the community that say, these are the things that we want, and we help them deliver on those goals and those promises that they're also want, and trying to be as diverse as we can, and of who we talk to into the community, from young people to businesses, et cetera. And I think this is where we're seeing some promise in the initial conversations that we're having. It's not us saying, you want this. It is the community saying, we want this. Can you help us make it happen?
I think we need to move on to our next item.
I'm afraid we do.
Sorry,
All right.
Radhika.
Well, we're happy to come back and have more conversation about this, a shorter presentation and much more discussion as well. All right. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is an update on the outside citywide public space explorer from James and Cornell from the Office of Planning and Community Development, who are joining us to provide an update on the outside Citywide Public Space Explorer. We have an hour for this agenda item.
Thank you.
Do- Okay,
There's some people you, so.
go. Like full intros? Quick intros. Okay, see you, Alfred. She there.
Hi, Nick Whipple, he, him.
Rebecca Brand, she her.
I keep forgetting. There you go. No.
We know it.
Julia, Adjourn, and Shield, she, her.
Feel Dapper, she, her, and I'll call him Young.
We're doing lightning intros, folks on the call virtually.
Or I will call on Matt.
Matt Hutchins.
I guess your names are on the
Dylan Gilsecki.
That's me.
Okay. Dylan Stevenson. Okay. Lost the thread here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Casey James, they, them pronouns, and I can kick us off here. So yeah, today Philip and I are going to talk about outside Citywide, and I'll give a little bit of background to the program and sort of the mapping product in particular that we'll be talking about, and then Philip will dive into some of the more recent updates that we've been doing.
Yep. Philip Carnell, they, them as well. Planning and equity data analyst. A lot of y'all know me from the bleary-eyed 7 a.m. housing meetings. And so I'm happy to be here at a time where it's the afternoon. Olivia, were we going to drive the car?
Yeah, go ahead and
Okay, cool. I'll share the screen and then I'll hand you the mouse.
Okay.
I will just note that this is one of our first truly hybrid meetings. Half of the people in the room and half of the people on the call. Thus, there's a little hiccup every now and then. So please bear with us.
Okay.
Do it that way. Hey, so yeah, thanks again for having us here today. As I mentioned, I'll start out just giving a little brief history into Outside Citywide, talk a little bit about the components of the project, and then pass it on to Philip for updates and sort of where we're headed from here on out. So I don't know that I've been here before, but I'm not sure that I overlapped with any.
It's been a while.
Yeah, current commissioners. But back in the day, so at the sort of the last comp plan update, there was a lot of discussion around how at that point, all the different departments and agencies were all kind of mapping and thinking about their different public space assets separately. So each had a different way of thinking about where their priority areas were, where their equity priority areas were, and so forth. So there was this sort of collective action within the city wanting to have a more integrated way to think about our public space system, and also to try to think about the future of that system and how it can better serve our growing communities, become a more equitable system, help to address some of the climate challenges that we were facing. So back then, this is where we started. So we just sort of, as I said, everything was sort of mapped and kept sort of tracked separately. So we just started pulling in all the different public space data that we could find. We ended up with this very messy map of everything in Seattle, and started to see, okay, so we have some some core issues here in terms of the distributional equity of these assets. A lot of things weren't being really used to their fullest potential. There's a lot of fragmentation in the system. So starting from this place, we started to build out our understanding, actually map all of these things out in one data set. But it was always also more than a map. So there were a lot of accompanying policy discussions. There's a lot of workshops, a lot of community engagement and partnerships that were part of this as well. So a lot of the results of those efforts were baked into the recent comp plan update. So some of the policies that we put in the public space section there, or the park section. But yeah, today we'll be focusing on the maps and what the different components are of those. So, you know, this was a pretty complicated exercise, right? Because we're looking at such a variety of different assets across the system. So we had to find sort of standardized ways to map those and to measure those. So, you know, we created a lot of rules. So for instance, you know, the graphic that you see on the left, any place where the primary purpose was a park, then we would map all the different things there, the buildings, the parking lot, and so forth. If it was a school or a library or some other place like that, we would only map the outdoor space. And we also had rules like around water bodies. So we would include a water body if it was surrounded on all sides by land-based public space. But for instance, like Parks owns parcels that extend into the Puget Sound, we would include those. We also, the tier system that you can see here, that was also developed as a way to sort of classify spaces based on some standard categories, such as how big they were, whether or not it was like a green belt versus a developed park, and so forth. And then those classifications, those tiers, were used to develop this analysis in terms of to sort of identify which areas of the city were being better or worse served by our existing assets. So these are meant to, the way that we developed this analysis was meant to reflect the actual sort of complexity of what it's like to try to access parks and public spaces in your neighborhood. So while, you know, for instance, you know, at the national level, TPL maps 10 minutes, you know, a 10-minute walk to a space. At the city level, we're able to get a little bit more nuanced, right? So if you can walk 10 minutes to a little 10-foot wide, you know, pocket park, you know, that's not the same thing as being able to, you know, access a park like Magnuson or something, right? There's a variety of different opportunities that these different spaces provide. So the analysis reflects that. If you have access to a lot of different types of public spaces, you have a sort of higher score or lower priority. If you have access to like a really amazing space, then you have a lower priority, and so forth. We also looked at access to all these different types of amenities. If you're 5, 10, 15 minutes away from some of the key reasons that people might choose to go to a public space. And we also factored in private open space. So parcels that were just sort of the very exceptionally large private parcels within the city, where basically people's homes are bigger than most public parks, were given less priority than places where that wasn't the case.
Wait, you did include private homes?
So areas of the city where, like, in general, we looked at a couple of things. One was using assessor data in terms of like water access and water views. And then we also looked at the size of the parcels. So basically just areas of the city where there's extreme wealth, where most people have really large private properties on the water. Those were not given a high priority for new park access. So all of those access considerations were combined with the Race and Social Equity Index to make sure that we're prioritizing areas of the city based on those factors as well. And then the final consideration is park pressure. So this is basically how we factor in the fact that, like, downtown, where you have thousands of people that are trying to access a small space, that puts a lot more pressure on that space than in less dense neighborhoods. And I think that is where I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you. So now I'm going to talk about a little bit about how Outside Citywide is used both internally to the City of Seattle organization, as well as by partners out in the community, and then go into what we did as updates in 2025. So this first one, this first bullet, the Trust for Public Land creates a park score every single year. This is a ranking of America's largest cities based on several different factors related to parks and public spaces, including things like investments, where the different public spaces exist throughout the city, and equity and demographic type situation. As one element of this, we submit the mapped public spaces. And then the city, the port, and the state also submit things like their investments in public spaces. So Port of Seattle owns several public spaces all along throughout the Duwamish, and they have investment plans for those as well. So they provide part of that investment data. And then demographic data as well too that they pull from the American Community Survey, Census Bureau, to see how we're doing along lines of equity, including racial demographics. Overall, this year, being 2025, we came out to be number 8 nationwide. Thank you for clapping, Julia. It was just me. It was, it's everybody that builds parks and public spaces together that really makes that happen. So clap for Seattle. The other folks who are using this include Seattle Parks Foundation, which incorporates this program and this mapping into their decision framework. And then departments internally, whenever they're considering strategic planning, such as SDOT's public space management team. And then SPU also has a lot of public property, parks themselves, and OPCD whenever we're looking at how we're planning. Members of the public and organizations also use this as a tool for advocacy around public space enhancements, but they're seeing what maybe the data isn't showing that we need to know more about. This is a data set that is a starting point and not kind of where the analysis ends, especially when it comes to creating functional plans or investment plans.
And this slide is making me realize I forgot to say that was one of the original purposes of this tool, was to be able to create a prioritization method that could be shared across different departments and agencies and nonprofits, so there could be easier potential for collaboration.
Do you want comments and questions as they come up, or do you want to wait?
Oh, I'm good either way.
Okay. Two questions about inputs into the system. Can you tell me how golf courses were treated? I noticed in one map that they were lumped in with cemeteries. So did you make an assumption that nothing can happen there, or they're not factored in? And then also there are a lot of secret public spaces in downtown Seattle. When a street is vacated, the developer has to provide some kind of public benefit. Sometimes that public benefit is not on the ground floor. So like there's a second floor or something plaza at the Washington State Convention Center that's supposed to be accessible to the public, that I think was part of the public benefits package. And so I'm just curious how you factored in kind of random downtown public spaces that maybe are not accessible.
I can take those and then you can jump in. So for the first one, I think Philip's going to walk us through the online tool at some point, but on there's a methodology document that shows sort of how we do the tiering process. But essentially, we considered everything that might limit public access in one way or another. So one of those is whether or not you have to pay a fee. Another is if there's limited hours, like a schoolyard. Another is if it's under private ownership, so maybe not everybody might feel comfortable there. So those are all factored in. Those are all sort of data points that we capture, so people can it's factored into our tiering analysis, but also people can use that to make their own sort of analysis or use it in their own ways. And so golf courses, because there is a fee to use them, are considered different than a free space, but they are still considered as part of the system. So we tried to capture that benefit while also not ignoring that difference, essentially. So like the same would be true for any other fee-based outdoor spaces. In terms of the second question, we collected a lot of data, building out this data set from sort of what STCI was collecting on POPs and trying to capture some of those like secret public spaces, like you're saying. I would say that there are some challenges in trying to have that be as accurate as possible and get all of that data. But we definitely make those attempts and try to capture everything that has that public access.
Is there an opportunity for members of the public to submit missing pieces of information for consideration?
We've talked about that before, but we haven't added that into the webpage. But if that's also sounding like something that people are saying, hey, we'd like to do this, and like at least a comment saying, hey, look into this space.
Yeah. People email me sometimes, and we've used tools like that internally to the city and shared it with a bunch of departments so people could add missing spaces, but that is something that we could consider in the future.
If you add it, somebody has to staff it and somebody has to respond to all of those emails. So I would understand if you have to prioritize when you solicit public feedback on a data tool. I would like to hear more. I'm sorry to interrupt the presentation.
Nathan, Deanna?
Okay, it was just a quick, Michaela's kind of line of questioning. I think there's benefit if there is a hidden POP to make sure that that's on the map so people can access it. But I also think, if the purpose is to identify where the need is, if it's hidden, I think there's still likely a need or a higher need, even if that's kind of mapped out. Those tend to not be as accessible, even if they are, they're privately owned open spaces, and so it still has a perception that it's not quite for everyone. So I would still, the value of mapping them so that people can become aware that these are available to them is still important, but I don't know if that would change necessarily where you're trying to identify need, just from my perspective.
Deanna, do you want to read your comment/question in the chat?
Sure, and I don't want to take time from valuable future presentation of this. Just, I'm such a fan of Outside Citywide, and I think I've expressed this in the past, but really is a world-class exercise that every city, would be jealous to have this. So congratulations, Casey, Phillip, and OPCD as a whole for doing this. It is really exceptional. And I was just curious to pile on to Michaela's questions and I'm sure it's all in your methodology, but do you characterize active versus passive recreation and times of day that they're open to the public as part of that kind of access ranking?
And first of all, thank you. Appreciate that a lot. And that is not a category that we track. I mean, I think that we have sort of proxies for that, like whether or not there's sports facilities or so forth. And then there would be, spaces like a green belt is a category that we're tracking. Natural areas is a category that we're tracking. But the complexity is that a lot of spaces have all of those things. They might have passive areas and active areas. So we're trying to find ways that we can, capture that kind of data in a usable way while also dealing with the complexity of the system, which, sometimes like what's a category for a type of space that the Parks Department operates might be very different than like what the port operates and so forth.
Right. Thank you for that.
So with that, I would like to just go into the process for the updates that we made in 2025. And I'll start by saying that we reached out to a group of, this year what we did was we reached out to a group of departments as well as the port to kind of get along our roster of like who is investing in public spaces or potentially opening public spaces across the city. So we used that roster this year in order to find out, what the new public space updates were this time around. I understand that this is not everybody as well. Like we didn't make a lot of the privately public owned spaces additions into this set of updates. That doesn't preclude us from doing that in the future. And as well, we added in some new population data and including the updated racial and social equity index. So I'm actually going to start by talking about the population data. And with the last set of the outside citywide prioritization maps, we were using 2020 census data, those being down at the block group level. And this time, just at that block level, the census doesn't produce data estimates in between the 2030, the decennial censuses. So we are using Washington OFM small area estimates. These get further down into those block levels and block group levels in a way that is more updated and more up to date in that sense, but also closer into kind of like there's different methodologies between the two that might pick up some of the more recent development in Seattle. The second big population estimates and equity data update that we did was moving from the tract-based racial and social equity index, that's this mapped here on the left, or I guess in the middle of the slide, to the block group RSC index, that's the map on the right. Just kind of conceptualizing, thinking about the difference between census tracts and census block groups. Each census block group, or actually each census tract is broken down into 2 or 3 block groups. So proportionally, they're going to have, around a third of the population of the tract as a whole. The tract itself having a population range of anywhere usually 5,000 to 7,000, sometimes even lower than 5,000, depending on the area. And with moving to a block group version of the RSC index, we can show some greater variation that occurs across Seattle neighborhoods, in particular where there might be masking within a census tract of RSJI priority populations. Some of the most pertinent spots where this occurs is along the waterfront, where you might not have a high enough population to create a whole census tract, in particular because they're less dense. There's a lot more single family homes that are wealthier looking out, and you might have them paired in with a less wealthy neighborhood directly adjacent, further away from the waterfront, that has a higher concentration of RSJI priority and RSJI racial and social justice initiative. Sorry, I'm doing the Seattle acronym thing. Equity priority populations. So you can particularly see this in these 2 maps along the Lake Washington waterfront. I want to call out there's some really great affordable housing properties around like Magnuson Park that kind of draw this different, that may be a reversal of that for that census tract. And I will mention as well, the big trade-off of this is that there's greater margins of error. There's greater room for error because we're using a sample-based survey, the American Community Survey, to pull in this data. So with that, it's kind of a trade-off on the reliability of the data itself sometimes.
And maybe for anybody that might be have heard about this project back in the day, we were actually originally using the block level data, but then wanted to streamline and just pull in this data set once it was developed, so we would have that coordination opportunity. So I'm excited about being able to bring that nuance back, because I think it is important to be able to make those distinctions.
Woo. And so next I'll go into some of the public space additions. These are the very many tedious hours that I spend like drawing shapes on a mat. And it's actually a lot of fun. It's pretty relaxing. I put a podcast on while I do it. We're both adding in these spaces. We are, in the case of the waterfront park, we're actually redrawing the old geography because the footprint changed. It used to be kind of more ovular, it kind of bulged out, and now it's like more of like rectangular, triangular right there at the pier that goes right there. The new what is it? It's jellyfish. It's the jellyfish play place. In addition, we were able to add in the waterfront promenade and different aspects throughout, including all the way down to the Habitat Beach and the rebuilt Pier 62. For each of these public spaces, we also tag things like the owners, who maybe what different types of amenities they've got, and I'll review that whenever I look at the Public Space Explorer with everybody. We also added in the Seattle Center Skate Plaza. This was, I believe, a vacated alley or street in order to create a new skate center. And the Mont Lake Lid, owned by WashDOT. And we were also able to add in a handful of other public spaces, including some plazas that SDOT has opened up over the years. The Detective Cookie Chess Park, which is a public space actually on a Seattle Housing Authority owned property. And it has a big chessboard in there. The Duwamish Rivers People Park and Shoreline Habitat. This one, you'll see that it's kind of two separate spaces. So something that is a bit of a nuance here is that there is a more publicly accessible and usable part that is you can walk out on kind of like over the water, and there's also depending on the tide, there's some steps that you can go around. But there's also a habitat area that isn't always publicly accessible and also floods kind of depending on the tide. So what we did was we separated those two things to kind of tag, hey, this space isn't as publicly accessible, even though it is a habitat, and this portion of it is publicly accessible for the most part. The Taylor Denny pickleball courts, which was between SDOT and Seattle Parks Foundation. And then we also added in the South Park Pump Station open area. So that's particularly the portion of it that is open, kind of with like the little trails. And I believe there's also a bench there the last time I was there.
And Deanna has a question and I have a question.
Great, go for it.
Deanna?
Yes, just very quickly, I was just curious if Outside Citywide has an API for apps to leverage the database.
Do we publish it to open data?
Did. I think it's still there.
Yeah. I would need to check and see if it's in our open data portal. The open data portal would usually have the data sets in it, and I do believe that our open data team and IT has set things like APIs to work through that sometimes. But it is also in ArcGIS Online. But that's of course got a barrier to it, which is you have to have an ArcGIS Online account.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And then my question, sorry if I missed it, is what was the cutoff date for your additions? So like, what there are projects that are like still in production or recently finished that don't make this, or just what's the calendar here for this?
Yeah, great. So I plan in particular so that we would have these public spaces added into the data set prior to when Trust for Public Land would actually need it for their park score analysis. So typically around the beginning of the year, there were some that we already knew were going to come online the following months. There's some where maybe the timeline isn't quite as open. So we felt comfortable, say, adding in elements of the waterfront that weren't fully open yet, but not yet other ones that maybe are still, I've actually got them on the map where like they've got a park expansion that is not fully even funded or designed, but like I've got it mapped just so that whenever it does come online, I can go in there and I can say, okay, you're open now. Yeah.
And that is partly that's part of the data that we track. It's one of the categories is like, is this open yet? Which can be very helpful to make the data set work for different purposes, right? So if you want to know what we already have, you can do that. But if you want to plan future things, knowing what's going to be built right there is pretty important.
Just to clarify, are the like, are you talking about like the land bank parcels? When you talk about like, there's not necessarily funding for the park yet, but the set aside.
Yeah, so I've got, I believe it's Morgan Junction Park.
Morgan
It's
Junction.
like, it's like one of the examples
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I've got like the extension there, and I've got and what I didn't show here was there was some sites, I believe technically in Delridge was like Highland Park area that were bought, and they haven't yet been developed, but I've already put them in here so that we like recognize that there's going to be a public space there eventually. I'd have to check. I don't believe that we publicly published those. It would like kind of keep them in the back end.
So okay, so you can't filter by feature expansion. I'm on the tool right now.
Yeah, not online, but if you download the data.
Okay, I'm hearing Vanessa's giving the very good guidance that we have 45 minutes left, and so we should hold questions at the end.
Well, the good news is we're about to move into the online portion, or we're gonna look at the app, and then we're gonna talk about future aspects of the program. So I just wanted to highlight, this is how the priority areas changed between the updates, with the 2022 being on 22-ish being on the left, and then the 2025 update being on the right. You know, something that is a key highlight of this map is that because we're kind of indexing, we're always going to show priority areas. There's always going to be areas of highest priority. It differs from like a level of service map, because a level of service map might be like trying to achieve a certain target, whereas this one is always going to show where the lowest priority versus the highest priority is indexed across the city. So things as one area moves into an area of priority, others will drop out, is one of the key things here. I think that some of the shifts you might see are in particular, say, along the, let's see, there's kind of different neighborhoods. In particular, there was a major shift that happened around U District, in part due to a lot of development, more population, increasing that pressure, as well as RSE index scores, racial and social equity index scores. There were also shifts around in West Seattle and South Seattle. So it doesn't overly majorly change from year to year, but you know, we do end up seeing some shifts whenever we do an update. The other thing that, you know, if some areas along the waterfront were priorities before, but they're maybe not showing up as priorities now because of the shift in the RSE index, that also doesn't like in conceptualizing a planning process, that doesn't take away from the fact that like a park that might be like something like waterfront access might not just serve the immediate neighborhood. It also can be seen as a destination. So it's not, this is not going to be a map that inhibits or negates that by saying, hey, you know, we're no longer investing in this neighborhood, or you should no longer invest in this neighborhood to all of our project partners, because this isn't a priority according to our map anymore. It's a starting point for them to consider, and also to consider within the context of the kinds of park and the kinds of amenities they're going to add into it. Yeah, do you have anything else that you wanted to add on this before I jump into the app?
Go ahead.
Cool. So I'm gonna stop it on the.
One thing, okay, while you're
Go for
doing
it.
that,
Yeah.
no, please
No,
go
you're
ahead.
fine.
I'll just, you might notice the sort of hatch over the industrial areas. I'll just point out that that was, a conversation that we had a lot early on. It's, when you show priority there, it can visually really dominate the map, which can be distracting for folks. But I just want to point out that because we're using, residential population as part of the factor in our prioritization methodology, that means that a little change within that area goes a long way. And so because there's very little green space or green infrastructure in those areas right now, it still is getting that high priority score, but little interventions can go a long way in terms of changing that in those areas. So basically the idea behind that is we do still need spaces for workers and for environmental quality and so forth in those areas, but it's just not the same as in a dense residential neighborhood.
And since working on this project as well too, especially down there, Soto BIA has put forth a green space plan. There's other orgs throughout the city that are focused on having it not just in residential areas but also in industrial areas. And I also, whenever I've presented this to students at UW, they've picked at it and said, "Well, why are you saying Harbor Island needs green space?" And just to Casey's point, there's also people who work there, go there during the day, and maybe it's not the same kind of needs as a directly neighborhood. Maybe it's slightly different, but we can all benefit from a tree in public space.
We'll live on their boats.
So next up, we wanted to look at the Public Space Explorer. This is the web app. You can see where I put when I most recently updated the app online earlier this June. Some quick overview, and then we get to the in public space inventory here as well. You can see we've got a total of about 1,000 public spaces with over 1,100 acres that we put onto the map here. And this really just shows, how many different types of players there are in the public space realm in Seattle. Parks and Rec, of course, being a major one. So whenever I filter on the right here for Parks and Rec ownership, that is going to continue. There's going to continue to be a lot of public spaces, but there's also SDOT owning many public spaces, public schools, privately owned public spaces as well, as we've talked about a little bit before. Seattle Housing Authority, and things like, I'll just click on colleges and universities that we've got around here, ranging from the north end to the south end. If you click on a public space, you can find out more details about it, what's kind of driving the data. And this is one of those things where maybe it would be a good thing to be able to have input on as well too. If we were to include an input questionnaire form, just to ensure that all of these are current and up to date and consistent with what people know that public space to be. There's also this pie chart that shows the total number of Seattle public spaces by ownership. Of course, parks being the largest. Just to break down kind of the different types of owners. We only have 12 owners in there. The list is a lot longer because there's a lot of small private public spaces. Maybe only maybe somebody only owns one.
But it is notable that Amazon made the cut.
Amazon did make the cut. 11 public spaces, 1.084% of the total number of public spaces. We also then have the different maps that are that make up the priority map. So of course that would be the prioritization is kind of loads first, but then you can look at public space access, So these are the different access measures that Casey was talking about earlier, the racial and social equity index, and then that measure of the population and the kind of like the park demand, the park pressure score. We have and I'll just say right under there, we have the different methodology papers as well as the data itself. That is where you would have the public data. This link is where we would have the public data and where you would be able to access it, as well as if there's an API link in there, then that's where the API link would be found by the public. And finally, we have the public space amenities themselves. And I kind of want to highlight some of them. There's trails, green spaces, but also we can look at things like sports facilities. So I'll zoom in on one of the recent additions that we talked about here. That is the skate park at Seattle Center as a sports facility. So this is a singular sports facility that is on the map, and they're all kind of treated somewhat the same in this mapping exercise. I think that it's on planners, it's on people who are looking and creating public spaces to see whether or not they're providing the amenities either within these broad categories or across these broad categories to really see that they're providing like the public spaces that are wanted by the public. And we've already started hearing about how are different public spaces measured, and like what's the sports facility at Occidental Square and what's the sports facility here. And it doesn't like preclude community from saying, hey, we also want like more ability to play pickleball. We also want like fields. We want play fields and things like that. So just kind of thinking about these as, they are a singular identifier and not necessarily where we end and say, and like, we don't check a box just by like saying this amenity is here when it comes to things like future planning. We start with it.
Which I would add would hopefully be true for any map out there, that it doesn't sort of replace the engagement side of the question, and just that is a good starting place. And that's what this is meant to be, help assisting planners in making, some broad decisions and looking about what the needs might be in a certain area, and being able to have a little bit more information going into a conversation rather than arriving at the answers through this alone.
Yep. So as kind of a last bit of this slide deck, just looking at like what's up next for it, this annual update cadence that we're looking at starting this process kind of this fall, winter again. So I'm kind of working on this timeline to ensure that anything that we have in there will be ready to go for the next year's Trust of Public Land request. And in addition to, continuing to reach out to different departments and orgs that have public spaces, one of the other things that I want to do and review this time around is the list of open existing amenities across different places, whether or not those public restrooms are still open or if there are new ones that have been added in, as well as playgrounds, urban agriculture, sports facilities. The next is kind of working alongside departments to implement outside Citywide. There's, part of the experience of like working on data projects throughout the city is like really doing like internal advertising and like building momentum to ensure that people understand the value of things, why we're doing them, and why we are continuing to produce these tools, but also just connecting with them and seeing how they intend to incorporate it into their own planning policies and programs, and leveraging those relationships so that when it comes to update time, people want to help me and identify those public spaces. And then just as a last point, something that long range planning is working on is how we'll incorporate this tool into comprehensive plan monitoring. That's all I got.
Haley,
Yeah, just to kind of echo Deanna's sentiment earlier, you should read the chat after the meeting. She gave you some compliments. This to me is such a satisfying use of city resources, you know, like, is it just you two doing this?
Yeah.
Project management?
And until a year ago, I will say it was all Casey. I got brought into this kind of from the analyst role a year ago. So before that, all Casey. I don't know. Did you have other?
I spent the pandemic, like you said, just in this routine of mapping out geometries.
I think sometimes there can be data fatigue. There's just so much information and we're just looking at information and we're never doing anything about it. And it's all obtuse and very hard to access. And I find the platform outside Citywide, the way it's designed, it's really accessible. It's really engaging from a user perspective. It instantly sparks my curiosity. I just discovered the restrooms tab and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so, we should be bringing these into conversations with people about how we increase restroom access across the city. And so just very impressed by the tool. At the very top of the conversation, I think you mentioned that you embedded something in the comprehensive plan parks components. Can you speak a little bit more about what policies are leveraging this in the comp plan or ensuring this endures and has utility?
Yeah. So what I was referencing was more, so there was like a lot of both let's see, but going back to like 2016, we did a whole review of like all the like past engagement and like all the results from that. And then, you know, just of all the policies and programs related to public space. And then that launched a bunch of conversations. There was an IDT and so forth on like how we can improve the system. Then we brought in more of the community engagement and public partnership side of things. So what I was referencing there is like I authored the parks portion of the comprehensive plan, and to do that, I brought in all the best I could find from years of conversations, both internally and with the public to help inform that. So we're referencing these maps in the plan, but it was more than that.
Yes.
And that was specifically, you brought those years of learning in for the One Seattle 2044 plan.
Yeah. The work between the two.
Okay, next. Piling on the praise, this is awesome. Also my first planning job was ground truthing parks amenities in GIS, so I feel you. And some of like what that data clarification and like ground truthing actually means. And I was wondering, I really appreciate the ways this integrates with the comprehensive plan. I think something that we talked about as a commission is in the context of the comprehensive plan is thinking about like linkages to parks. And so in places in the city where there isn't necessarily land area for like new large facilities, thinking about how we get people from like where they live or where they work to the like tier 1, tier 2 parks that we have that might offer more of those amenities. And I'm wondering, I think the tier information that you have is kind of hidden in the final app, but I'm wondering if that was like a purposeful and intentional thing. Like don't focus on the tier of the park, just focus on the priority areas and the amenities that they offer. And also noticing that a lot of the like greenways and more transitory park areas are rated lower in the tiers. And so asking for maybe your thoughts on the role of those spaces as linkages in the system and how the city talks about them as and their like role in the larger open space plan.
And so what are you referencing when you say that they're
I was just looking at the methodology document.
Yeah.
Briefly and like I
know green belts are sort of maybe in a lower tier, especially green belts without trails. But I don't think that, so transportation was tricky, you know, with a lot of these things, we had to like come up with, new rules for how we're looking at it. So basically, with transportation, because like basically this was meant to capture like places where people can hang out, essentially.
Two places, not. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily meant to map out connections between places, but the destinations essentially. So with some place like where there's a trail with like a nice big lawn next to it where people might go and like choose to have a snack or something like that, that would be included in the inventory. But if it was like, for instance, like if you just imagine like the Burt Gilman and some of those places where it's just like chain link fence and pavement on the other side, that wouldn't be included. So that's sort of how we dealt with that sort of piece of our network. And then in terms of the tiering, I think it's true that we don't include that on the online tool at all. I think part of it is that like the Parks Department has their own classification system, and I think maybe I was just trying to avoid confusion with that. Of course, this is different because it's mapping a bunch of facets that aren't in that system. But a lot of this is just, it's really helpful for us to know how people are using this. So if we get feedback that a lot of people are relying on that tier system in some way and having that information up front would be helpful, then that's something we could definitely consider adding in future updates. So we always really welcome that kind of feedback.
And what I'm hearing on your point about like connecting to park spaces is like, am I hearing correctly that like you would like to understand better how people are connecting to parks either via like transit, by car, by walking? Is that?
Yeah, like I think if you live in an area that, for example, looking at sports facilities, it's maybe outside of that 5-minute, 10-minute walk shed, but you still are using those facilities. How are you getting to them? And are there safe pedestrian networks that get you to them, or are you dependent on a transit system or on a car? I think it's outside the scope of this project, but it's something that I think would be great to see policy users and SDOT using your data and work for.
I did actually map that once. I don't know. I haven't updated it in like, I don't know, 8 years or
Well,
something.
and I think it's a cool layer. Like I know that a lot of the transit network stuff got pulled out, but I think it's a cool layer to like then put back on. Like you have these heat maps of the city and what connects between the spaces that maybe are more islands.
Yeah, definitely.
And neighborhood centers. Deanna, I think is next.
Dylan G.
Oh,
Dylan
Dylan.
S. Then Deanna,
Oh,
and we've got
lost.
5 minutes, and I want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah, I just want to say, thanks for this presentation. The data is fascinating. These maps are really cool. Starting to dig into it. But I was thinking from just like how you might, I guess how I might personally use this beyond just kind of geeking out on and just enjoying the maps and the data online. And I was thinking earlier this summer, I was picking my son up from summer camp and wanted to play soccer with him after camp on the way home. And where are the soccer fields between where I picked him up in Leshai and my home in Central District? I had to go randomly just kind of bike around the neighborhood and try and find places and navigate these. And I look and I see, there's sports facilities are one of the things that are mapped, which is super cool. And I know this gets into a whole nother level and layer of detail, but the ability to be able to go to the sports facilities and then say, oh, basketball or soccer or what the sport is would be like so incredibly helpful. Because typically when I look, when I'm looking for for a park and a certain attribute, I'm not looking for sports. I'm looking for soccer for me personally, and other people are looking for basketball or looking for disc golf, whatever else it is. And so I just think that level, I know it's a lot more extra work, but it would be so cool to be able to kind of link that in. And it just would have been directly like very useful to me earlier this summer when I spent a couple weeks trying to figure out where soccer goals were. And then the other thing, again, I'm just talking anecdotes, and I'll be quick here, is with playgrounds, the ability to map playgrounds that have like spray parks. Because of course, in the summer for those 3 months, I'm looking for places where my little boy can go and get wet and cool down. And so the ability to turn the playground layer and then see the restroom, which is awesome, but also be able to see just like, okay, where a spray park is or where a certain type of like playground is would also be super cool. But yeah, just wanted to share those and just share my appreciation for the work you guys are doing. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. I would love that too. I think, there's basically, we're working within the limitations of, us sort of trying to do this without being able to even like visit these sites, just like look at, Google Maps and see what we can see there, right? So and also, keeping this within a scope that's manageable to like keep updating and so forth. But I would love it to be able to evolve in those ways in the future. I think being able to have some of those like user functions, I think would be awesome.
I will say I did spend some time on the waterfront whenever I was mapping that, but
Well, yeah. When I mapped 1,000 public spaces around the city, that wasn't quite feasible. Dylan Stevenson?
Yeah, I just want to echo, I think, what everyone else has said and just express a lot of gratitude for this resource. I'm super excited about it. I'm excited to share it with anybody who will listen to me because this is really just phenomenal, great work. I did have a question, I think, about granularity of the data. I just want to hear your thoughts about in the future, if you have any ideas about including like point data. It does seem like it's like on the polygon level. So I was just like, I got excited about the restrooms map too. Noticed that the waterfront is just a really long polygon. So like, where would that bathroom be? I went to the opening over the weekend, saw there was a new public bathroom. Super excited, great resource. And so being able to, I think, like, when you need to go, that's really important information. So what are your thoughts about point level data?
I would say that would go in the category of would be amazing if we had the resources to do it. I mean, I think, I think a lot of this would just require a little bit more, channeling the time and resources needed to be able to develop it to that level. But I can definitely see how that would be really helpful. And when we're talking about these huge spaces, I'm just like, the scavenger hunt of there's a restroom somewhere in there is always going to be the most helpful. Yeah.
And I would just like to add, it's you're too modest to say it, this is 10% of what you do? 5? I mean, you both have other very big projects, so just
or less, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We are at the time for this agenda item. Deanna, is it pressing?
I would love to ask it. If possible, very quick, and maybe there's no answer for it. With regard, congratulations on drafting the One Seattle Plan chapter on parks and open space. But I was curious, and maybe I'm just not finding it in the right spot. Was there a particular target for like in 20 years where we aspire with, the comprehensive plan policies and vision, what the transformation might be and what that would take us to where we need to be? And as an example, we know that world-class cities such as Vienna, Sydney, there's some Chinese cities, et cetera, measure their success of access to open space. They're on the order of like 56, 57 or higher % of the city being dedicated to open space. I'm just curious if you could share what the vision for the transformation in the next 20 years might be and the goals, and B, if you have if it was, your personal, not necessarily the city's, I know that city might not have this out, but your personal goal of what you think would be transformative for the city in kind of like a metric such as coverage or percentage of land dedicated to open space.
I would
really good question.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can get into all my visions quickly, but I think one thing is that some of those like the policy conversations we have, if you go to the Outside Citywide website, there are some documents that sort of show a vision for the future of public space. A lot of it was around sort of like identifying where we think, because basically, we're working with we're working with a lot of constraints now. We don't have the the funds to buy up massive amounts of land to try to add to this system, right? So a lot of the question is, things like you brought up earlier, how can we improve connectivity to get people to the spaces that we have, but also how can we get a lot more out of the spaces that we have? So, there's a lot of places that you just haven't seen the development, the investment. So maybe it's, just a sort of abandoned lawn or piece of asphalt or something that could use a lot more love and do a lot more to serve the community. So I think there's a lot of strategies that are outlined for how we can sort of put those ideas into place and to try to do more with what we have. Maybe I'll just leave it at that. There's, I think, a lot more that we could think about and work towards, and happy to have that conversation with you all offline or, at another time.
I'll just add one minor thing for myself in addition to what Casey said, which is I think we're, in the context of limited space, needing space for new housing, all of those kinds of contexts, balancing what we're doing. It's great to see a balance also coming out of like Radcliffe being here earlier, considerations for how right of way is also public space and can function that way. So I think that there's a great opportunity, and I'm excited. Y'all saw like top of the list was SDOT public space management. I'm excited to work more with them on these topics throughout time and to talk with them on it. Yeah.
And then the other part of your question, I'll say that the Parks Department is currently working on updating their plan. And I think that in terms of the relationship between the comprehensive plan and the Parks plan is typically like set the level of service standard and those metrics for what we're trying to achieve. And then we reference that within the comprehensive plan. But that could be something that we consider more in the future if there's any goals that we want to set in the comprehensive plan for the non-parks components of our open space system.
And is that part of the scoping? The plan, there was a bullet point around the comprehensive plan monitoring. Is that part of that scope? Setting metrics.
We're specifically looking at what those kinds of metrics might look like. In terms of like monitoring itself, that wouldn't be where we would set things like targets.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and thanks for those great questions. Really appreciate the engagement on this.
Thank you. And as I think CEO said, please do look at the chat because there are tons of in there.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much. I'm up. Okay. Very short commission business, unless there are other things to talk about. I just wanted to provide time in case we needed more time. Really, the only update I have for you all is that just a reminder that tomorrow is the public hearing on the proposed amendments to the comp plan and the implementing legislation for HB 1110. Zio, Michaela, and Matt are going to be providing testimony based on our letter, which was transmitted last week and posted on our website. There's a morning session that's online, and whatever people can't be entertained in the morning will then roll into the afternoon session online and then in person. I think there was a question somewhere, maybe in the chat, about if there has been any additional information released by City Council on pulling together a package among those 108 amendments, and there hasn't been anything. I think they might be waiting until after the hearing tomorrow. So we will, of course, continue to monitor it. And then Council has scheduled 3 meetings next week. And I keep getting the days wrong, but they've got a select committee on Wednesday, the 17th, Thursday, the 18th, and then Friday afternoon, the 19th, with the intent on voting on the plan by the 19th. So we'll have
can we clarify that when the select committee votes on it, it's the same as the full council vote? It doesn't
It
have to
is
go from the
not.
committee. Okay.
Isn't the select committee
The select committee, this is my understanding, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. The select committee is the full council, but, so the select committee will vote on the plan. And then if there is additional environmental analysis, whether it be a full supplemental or just additional environmental analysis that is required before the plan can be adopted, that will take place before the full council, sitting as the full council, adopts the plan. So there is a lag in between the select committee approving the plan and the full council adopting the plan.
Okay.
And we'll know in that in-between time, how long that between time
Yes.
is. Okay.
Yes. So I would imagine the week of, I would have, not a betting person, but I would imagine the week of the 22nd of September, we will have a better sense of whatever animal is adopted by the select committee, the degree of environmental review that will be required, and if that then will, if council thinks that can be done by the end of the year, or if we're looking at next quarter, first quarter 26, which would have implications to ESRC funding.
Different council members too.
And potentially different council members, yeah. So that's all the business I have. Wondering if any of you have questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are we getting a new Get Engaged?
Yeah.
Oh, we are, yes. We are getting a new Get Engaged member who was appointed this past Monday. Unfortunately, Matt cannot join this afternoon.
No.
So our current Get Engaged member, Matt, is, he only gets his schedule a week in advance.
Yeah.
So even though I asked him about 3 weeks ago if this would work, but I promised him that we'd invite him to the next.
Yeah, let's go.
I always love it when people do that.
Exactly. Show up. So we, our new Get Engaged member, I believe she couldn't make today's meeting, but I think she can, I think her first meeting will be the meeting on the 25th. Her name is Margaret Sells. I think I'm saying that right. She is a law student at UW, and has a background in transportation and land use planning, and is studying land use law. So I think she'll be a great asset. And if there's, I'm just looking. So Matt, we'll text you if you think you can join. Okay. Dylan, do you think you can join this afternoon?
So are we still doing a happy hour, Matt, in Matt Malloy's honor?
In honor of nobody.
Yeah, we are. In his honor. Great.
Right on. Yeah. Do you have my number? Yeah, send me a text.
Okay, I think I do.
Maybe is anybody else that needs a location, drop something in the chat
Yes.
so we can text.
I'm just looking. So it doesn't look, well, yeah. Okay, you have to be careful. So,
We're gonna meet at one of those secret hidden downtown locations.
exactly. We're meeting.
Let's go find a public open space, a privately owned public open space.
Dylan, I'll look up your number. And I
Yeah,
think we can adjourn. So you don't.
We can adjourn. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoying
Thanks,
it
y'all.
remotely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, do you want to ask how long will